Ethan Cole never thought his life would take him beyond the small town where he grew up. He had joined the military for steady work, for the chance to see the stars, and to make something of himself. He had trained hard, served quietly, and done what was asked of him. He was not the kind of man who chased glory. He only wanted to do his duty and return home in one piece. Now he found himself on a distant world unlike anything he had ever imagined. It was a colony of humans, settled long ago, where science and tradition lived side by side. Towering buildings made of crystal and steel rose toward the sky. But the people still bowed to their queen and gathered in grand halls filled with music, robes, and crowns. To Ethan, it felt as if he had stepped into a storybook. He had been assigned to stand guard during a royal gathering. Dozens of soldiers in polished uniforms lined the walls, keeping their eyes forward, trying to remain unnoticed. Ethan stood among them, silent and steady, his rifle held across his chest. He told himself to blend in, to keep his thoughts quiet, and to wait until his shift was over. The palace hall shimmered with light from 1,000 glowing crystals. Nobles and officials filled the room, their gowns and cloaks flowing behind them as they moved. Voices rose and fell in laughter, in whispers, in the pride of being close to power. To Ethan, they seemed like people from another world. Their smiles were sharp, their eyes watchful, and their pride heavy. At the center of it all sat the queen, dressed in flowing silver. Her crown gleamed under the light, her posture calm and commanding. Around her stood her family, each one dressed in colors so rich that even the floor seemed to shine beneath them. And then there was the princess. Ethan saw her when she entered the hall, and for a moment, his breath caught in his chest. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her gown shimmered like liquid light. Her hair fell like a river of silver, and her eyes were a deep violet that seemed to cut through the crowd. She moved with a grace that made others step aside without a word. She was the kind of person who did not need to speak to be noticed. Ethan quickly forced his eyes forward again. He reminded himself that he was a soldier, not a guest. It was not his place to look for long. He gripped his rifle tighter and told himself to stay still. The music grew softer as the queen raised her hand. The crowd quieted, and introductions began. Nobles spoke of their families, their victories, and their loyalty to the crown. Each word carried weight. Each bow meant more than simple respect. This was not just a gathering. It was a measure of power. Ethan tried to keep his mind from wandering, but his eyes betrayed him. Again and again he found them drifting back toward the princess. She stood beside her mother, her chin lifted high, her eyes scanning the hall as if searching for something unseen. Then, to Ethan's shock, her gaze landed on him. At first he thought it was a mistake, a soldier in a line of dozens, standing silent and unimportant. Why would she notice him? He straightened, his heart pounding, and told himself she would look away in a moment. But she did not. Her violet eyes stayed fixed on him, steady and certain, as if she had found what she was looking for. A silence spread through the hall, soft at first, then heavy as others noticed where she was looking. Ethan felt the weight of it press against his chest. She stepped forward. The sound of her gown brushing against the polished floor was loud in the quiet hall. All eyes followed her as she moved, but she did not glance at anyone else. She stopped only a few steps away from Ethan, close enough that he could see the light shining in her eyes, close enough that his breath caught again. And then she spoke. Her voice was clear, steady, and filled with a strange certainty. "He is mine." The words struck the hall like thunder. Nobles gasped, guards shifted, and the queen's eyes narrowed. Ethan felt the ground tilt beneath him, his body frozen in disbelief. He had no idea why she had chosen him, no idea what it meant, and no idea what storm he was about to walk into. All he knew was that nothing would ever be the same. The hall was still frozen after the princess spoke. No one seemed to know how to react. The nobles stared with wide eyes, their whispers spreading like fire across the room. Guards shifted uneasily in their places, unsure if they had heard correctly. Even the queen herself looked startled for the first time in years. Ethan could not move. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. He was only a soldier, one face among many, yet the princess had walked past all of them and spoken words that no one expected. He wanted to speak, to explain that it must be a mistake, but his lips would not move. The queen rose slowly from her seat, her gown flowing behind her like a wave of silver. The room went completely silent as she fixed her gaze on her daughter. Her voice was calm, but each word carried sharp weight.
"Alira," she said, "what is the meaning of this?"
The princess did not lower her head. Her eyes stayed locked on Ethan, as if she had already decided and nothing could change her mind. Her voice was quiet but strong. "I have chosen." The words hit the hall again, louder than any trumpet. Several noblemen shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a tall man with golden chains around his neck, stepped forward. His voice shook with outrage. "Your Majesty, this cannot be allowed. The princess is promised to one of our houses. We have prepared for years. To throw this away for a soldier is an insult to every family here." His words drew nods from others. Murmurs filled the air again, this time sharper, heavier. All of it pressed against Ethan, who felt as though the floor might open beneath him. The queen raised her hand, silencing them. Her eyes, sharp as steel, turned toward Ethan. "You," she said. "Step forward." Ethan's throat was dry. He wanted to vanish, to melt into the crowd of guards and pretend none of this had happened. But his feet moved against his will, carrying him into the center of the hall, where every eye followed him. He stopped a few steps away from the queen, bowing his head because it was the only thing he knew to do. "Your Majesty," he whispered. His voice shook, and he hated that it did, but he could not hide his fear. The queen studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she asked a simple question. "Who are you?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Ethan Cole, Your Majesty, private in the 4th Division. I was assigned to your guard rotation this week." The words sounded small, unworthy of the hall, unworthy of the moment. He wished he had something greater to say, but that was all he was. The queen's gaze never left him. "And what do you know of my daughter?" Ethan shook his head quickly. "Nothing, Your Majesty. I swear it. I have never spoken to her until this moment." For the first time, the queen's stern look softened just slightly, though her voice stayed cold. "And yet she has spoken. In front of her family, in front of the entire court." Ethan wanted to answer, but no words came. He could only stand there, his heart racing, waiting for judgment. Princess Alira finally broke the silence. She stepped closer to him, her hand brushing against his arm, her voice steady. "I see something in him that you do not," she said. "Honor, strength. He is not like the others who only see crowns and power. He stands as he is, and that is enough." Gasps filled the room. Some of the nobles muttered angrily. Others exchanged looks of disbelief. The golden-chained noble clenched his fists, his face red with anger. The queen's eyes narrowed. "You risk more than your reputation, Alira. You risk the balance of the realm. A choice like this could divide the court, weaken the crown, and bring ruin to us all." But the princess did not falter. She stood taller, her voice rising so that all could hear. "Then let them see. Let them see that my choice is not weakness but strength. If they cannot accept it, then they have already betrayed the realm." The silence that followed was heavier than before. Ethan could feel the weight of every noble's judgment, every whisper of doubt. He wanted to deny it all, to say he was unworthy, but the princess's hand on his arm kept him still. The queen finally spoke again, her words slower, measured. "Very well. If you wish to stand by this soldier, then he must prove himself, not with words, but with deeds." Her eyes locked on Ethan, and the hall seemed to grow colder. "You will face the trials. If you succeed, perhaps you will earn the right to stand beside her. If you fail, then this ends here." Ethan felt his stomach twist. Trials. He did not know what they were, but he knew they would not be easy. The princess's grip on his arm tightened, her eyes still fierce. She gave a small nod, as if telling him to trust her. And for the first time, Ethan wondered if fate had placed him here for a reason.
The night after the gathering, Ethan could not sleep. His thoughts circled endlessly. The princess's words replayed in his mind again and again. He still could not believe she had chosen him, a common soldier with no name and no rank. Worth speaking of. The queen's challenge echoed even louder. Trials. He had no idea what they meant, but he knew they would decide his future. When morning came, he was summoned to the training grounds. Soldiers in polished armor lined the paths, their eyes following him as he walked. Whispers chased him. Some were curious, others full of scorn. Many could not understand why the princess would risk so much for someone like him. At the far end of the field stood the queen, her presence commanding even in the open air. The princess stood beside her, calm but firm, her eyes never leaving Ethan as he approached. The queen raised her voice so all could hear. Ethan Cole, you stand accused of disturbing the order of this realm. You have drawn the attention of my daughter, and with it, the anger of the court. If you wish to remain, you must prove your worth through the trials. They will test your courage, your strength, and your honor. Fail, and you will be cast out forever. Ethan bowed his head. I understand. The queen nodded, and a gate opened at the side of the field. From within came a group of men, strong and broad, each carrying wooden blades for combat. They were not strangers to battle. These were seasoned guards, men who had trained for years. The first trial was clear. He would have to fight. A circle was drawn, and Ethan was handed a simple wooden sword. It felt heavy in his grip. He had trained before. Yes, but never like this. These were no practice matches with friends. This was a test meant to break him. The first opponent stepped forward, swinging with practiced force. Ethan blocked clumsily, the impact shaking his arms. He staggered, but he held his ground. The crowd shouted as the fight grew fierce. Ethan's strikes were not elegant, but they were steady. He refused to back down. When the chance came, he pushed forward, knocking his opponent to the ground. Gasps rose from the crowd. The soldiers stood again, glaring, but the queen raised her hand. Enough! Next, another fighter entered the circle. Then another. One by one, they came at Ethan. His arms ached, his breath grew heavy, and sweat poured down his face. But he kept moving. He blocked, he dodged, he struck when he could. He was beaten to the ground more than once, but each time he forced himself back to his feet. By the time the last fighter fell, Ethan could barely stand. His body screamed in pain, but his spirit burned. He had not given up, and that mattered more than the bruises on his skin. The queen studied him for a long moment before speaking again. The first trial is complete. You have endured, but endurance alone is not enough. She signaled, and the second trial began. Ethan was led to a maze built from towering stone walls. The task was simple. He had to find his way through before the sun set. But the queen's voice carried a warning. The maze is not empty. There are those inside who will try to stop you. If you cannot outlast them, you will not succeed. The gates opened, and Ethan stepped inside. The walls stretched high above him, the paths twisting in every direction. Shadows moved between the corners, and he knew he was not alone. He moved carefully, his senses sharp. The first attacker came fast, lunging from the shadows with a staff. Ethan blocked with his arm, the strike leaving it numb. But he pushed back, forcing his attacker to retreat. More followed. Some tried to wear him down with quick strikes. Others tried to frighten him with sudden charges. Ethan fought them all, but he also kept moving, never losing sight of his goal. He reminded himself that the princess was waiting, that failure meant losing everything. Hours passed. His legs burned, his vision blurred, but finally he saw light ahead. He pushed forward, breaking through the last turn of the maze. The crowd erupted as he stumbled out, his body battered but his eyes still clear. The queen's gaze was sharp, yet there was something new in it, a trace of respect. The second trial is complete, she said. You have proven your will. The princess stepped forward, her eyes bright with pride. She wanted to speak, but the queen raised her hand again. One trial remains, the queen said. Her voice carried across the field, firm and final. It will decide everything. Ethan's chest tightened. 2 trials had nearly broken him. Whatever came next would be even harder. But as he looked at the princess, standing tall with her faith unshaken, something inside him steadied. He knew he could not walk away now.
The sun was falling when Ethan was brought before the queen again. His body still hurt from the maze, his arms bruised and his legs weak, but he stood tall. He knew the third trial was coming, and he knew it would be the hardest. The queen's eyes studied him carefully, and for a moment the silence was so heavy that even the birds in the distance seemed quiet. "This is the final trial," the queen said at last. "Strength and will you have shown, but courage is not enough if the heart is weak. Today you will be tested not only with your body but with your soul. You must protect what is most precious." Her words stirred confusion among the crowd. Even Ethan did not understand at first. But then he saw guards move, leading the princess into the center of the field. She stood straight, her chin lifted, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of worry. Ethan's chest tightened. He realized what the queen meant. The final trial was not about himself. It was about her. The queen raised her voice. "You are to stand beside her, then you must protect her. Not only from those outside, but from those who would betray us within. The test will show if you can bear the weight of such a duty." A sudden shout came from the far side of the grounds. Figures in dark cloaks rushed forward, blades gleaming in their hands. Ethan's heart jumped, but he moved without thinking. He placed himself between the attackers and the princess, his body low, his arms ready, though he carried no sword this time. The first assailant charged. Ethan caught his strike, twisting the man's wrist until the blade clattered to the ground. He pushed him aside, but another came fast, swinging hard. Ethan ducked, the blade slicing air above his head, then drove his shoulder into the man's chest, knocking him back. The princess stood behind him, her eyes wide, her gown catching the dust of the field. Ethan called over his shoulder, his voice firm. "Stay behind me." She nodded, her hands gripping the folds of her gown tightly, trusting him. More attackers came, two at once this time, blades flashing.
Oh.
Ethan's arms burned as he blocked and shoved, his body running on pure instinct. One blade cut across his arm, leaving a hot line of pain, but he did not falter. Struck with his elbow, sending one man down, then caught the wrist of the other and forced him to the ground. The crowd was shouting now, voices raised in disbelief and fear. Some called for guards to intervene, but the queen raised her hand, stopping them. She wanted to see how far Ethan could go. Another man charged, faster and stronger than the rest. Ethan's strength was fading, but his will grew sharper. He grabbed a fallen blade and swung with everything he had, the clash ringing loud across the field. His body ached, his wounds bled, but he did not yield. At last, the final attacker fell to the ground, groaning in defeat. Ethan stood panting, his chest rising and falling hard, his arms trembling from exhaustion. He turned slowly, making sure the princess was safe. She was still there, untouched, her violet eyes shining with pride and relief. Ethan dropped the blade and fell to one knee, not from choice but from the weight of his body. Sweat and blood marked his uniform. But his eyes stayed steady as he looked toward the queen. The queen's face was unreadable for a moment. Then she stood and spoke, her voice clear. "You have faced men stronger than you, challenges meant to break you, and dangers that sought to take what you were told to protect, and still you stood. You have proven more than strength. You have proven loyalty." The crowd was silent, unsure of how to respond. Some nobles looked furious, others shaken. But the princess stepped forward, ignoring them all. She reached down and took Ethan's hand, helping him to his feet. Her voice carried across the field. "He has proven himself. He is mine, and I will not take back my word." The queen's eyes softened, just slightly as she looked at her daughter, then back at Ethan. There was no smile, but there was respect. "The trial is done," she said. "What comes next will not be decided by force, but by choice. And that choice has already been made." Ethan's heart pounded. He had survived. He had protected her. And though he did not yet know what the future would bring, he felt for the first time that he belonged. The courtyard was filled with voices long after the trial ended. Some nobles shouted in anger, demanding that the queen reject Ethan. Others whispered among themselves, uncertain of what the future would bring. Guards stood tense at every corner waiting for orders. The air was heavy with tension, but in the middle of it all, the princess still held Ethan's hand, refusing to let go. The queen walked forward slowly, her steps measured, her eyes sharp as she looked at everyone. When she spoke, her voice carried across the entire courtyard, silencing every whisper. "The trials are complete. The soldier has shown courage, strength, and loyalty. He has protected what matters most. He has faced danger and did not falter, has proven himself worthy." Gasps spread through the crowd. Some nobles shook their heads in disbelief. Others bowed in reluctant respect. The queen turned her gaze to her daughter, then to Ethan. My daughter has chosen, dies, and though her choice defies tradition, it is her right to choose. What matters now is not what the nobles demand, but what is best for the realm. And today, we have all seen what this soldier is capable of. He stood when others doubted him. He fought when others would have fled. That is the kind of strength we need. The golden-chained noble stepped forward, his face red with fury. This is madness. He is a commoner. He has no name, no wealth, no land. You allow this, your majesty, you weaken the crown. You set aside years of alliances for one man. The queen's gaze snapped toward him, her voice like iron. It is not alliances that keep the crown strong. It is the people who believe in it. If this soldier has earned their respect, then he is no longer only a commoner. He is a symbol of what our realm stands for: courage, honor, and loyalty. If you cannot accept that, then it is not he who betrays us, but you. The noble froze, his anger swallowed by the weight of her words. He bowed stiffly and stepped back, his pride wounded, but his voice silenced. The queen looked once more at Ethan. Ethan Cole, from this day forward, you are no longer only a soldier of the guard. You are a protector of the crown, bound to the princess by duty and by choice. If you accept this, you will walk beside her, not as a servant, but as her equal. Ethan's breath caught. His heart raced as the weight of her words sank in. He was only a man who had once dreamed of a simple life, but now he was being offered a place that seemed impossible. He looked at the princess, who met his gaze with steady eyes and a faint smile. "Accept," he said quietly, his voice trembling with both fear and pride. The courtyard erupted. Some clapped, others shouted in anger, but none could change what had been spoken. The queen had made her decision, and it was final. The princess stepped forward, standing at Ethan's side, her hand still holding his. She lifted her head high, her voice ringing across the courtyard. "He is mine, and he has proven that he belongs. Let this be the beginning of something new." The crowd quieted, their eyes shifting from the princess to Ethan. Some still doubted, but others began to nod, their respect growing. For the first time, Ethan felt the weight of their gazes, not as judgment, but as recognition. The queen turned and began to walk back toward the palace. "Then it is done," she said. "Let history remember this day." Ethan stood in the center of the courtyard, his body weary, his wounds aching, but his spirit stronger than ever. He had faced trials he never expected. He had stood against fear and doubt. Although the path ahead would not be easy, he knew he was no longer walking it alone. The princess leaned close and whispered so only he could hear, "I told you, you were mine from the moment I saw you." Ethan smiled faintly, the sound of the crowd fading around him. For the first time in his life, he did not feel small. He felt ready for whatever came next. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with gold and crimson, as if the world itself was marking the moment. And in that light, a soldier and a princess stood together, their story only just beginning.